debate, the Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will be splitting my time today with the member from Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. I'm very pleased to speak today on our Conservative motion to cancel the carbon tax. People will often say, yes, as the official opposition, your role is to question the government and hold them to account. But what would you do differently if you were in government? Today, our motion to immediately cancel the carbon tax is giving Canadians an actionable item to help address the 40-year high inflation that is hurting households, farmers, not-for-profits, and small businesses right now. And I hope that all members of this House will support this motion. Mr. Speaker, I look for every opportunity to bring the voices from my riding of Kelowna Lake Country to Ottawa. With the debate today on the Liberals' failed carbon tax, I would like to quote Bob from Kelowna Lake Country, who wrote to me recently. He wanted to inform me that his household had, quote, just received our house gas bill, and we have a carbon tax of $32.24. This was even though his family had, quote, installed a high-efficiency furnace. So even when Bob takes action to reduce his carbon footprint, he still gets hit with a tax bill. There's a reason for that, Mr. Speaker, and that's because the carbon tax is a tax plan. It is not an environmental plan. It's a classic high-tax Liberal move for their high-spend Liberal agenda. The results of this policy are now on full display. For Canada's climate change goals, the Liberals have missed every target they set and left Canada as 58th out of 64 countries on climate performance, according to the new Climate Change Performance Index presented at COP27 last year. But it doesn't have to be this way. The US doesn't have a carbon tax. This puts Canadian people and businesses at a disadvantage, as they have to pay more taxes than our closest trading partner. This Liberals' carbon tax reduction plan is to tax Canadians. I was speaking with a young woman recently who is a university student living at her parents' house. And in addition to being stressed out herself, she was also very concerned about her parents, which really touched my heart. She said her parents are middle class and she sees how hard they work. She said their household expenses are not keeping up, and she's worried about the stress level of her parents and worried about their future retirement. Now, Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, the Liberals' economic plan is to keep increasing the carbon tax, even though Canadian families, farmers, not-for-profits, and small businesses are being squeezed by 40-year high inflation and the largest jump in interest rates we've seen in a generation. The Bank of Canada's Governor, Tiff Macklem, told Finance Committee members in a letter that by the Bank of Canada's own calculations, by its experts, that the carbon tax is contributing to the inflation crisis. According to Mr. Macklem, removing the carbon tax on gasoline, natural gas, and fuel oil would have reduced the level of inflation which Canadians are facing. Yet, instead of giving Canadians relief, instead of recognizing the generational inflation crisis our country is facing, instead of eliminating or even just pausing the carbon tax increases to provide some relief, the Liberals are once again planning to increase the tax on April 1st. This cruel April Fool's Day increase is not a joke to the single parents who have to fill up their car to take their kids between school appointments and extracurricular activities. The April Fool's Day tax increase is not a joke to the small business owner who is still holding over $100,000 in new debt due to government pandemic policies, and every month they find it harder to pay this debt back and pay their bills due to inflationary cost increases. This April Fool's Day tax increase is not a joke for the senior who sees their CPP OAS pensions shrink in comparison to rising inflation, making them question whether they can afford their heating bill next month. Richard from my riding wrote to me recently saying, quote, "We got our first OAS check of 2023. It went up $2 per month. That means we can buy half a grapefruit once a month. How do the Liberal NDP figure that is helping seniors? When you factor inflation in, we have lost money. So there goes our half grapefruit," unquote. Conservatives have brought forth the heartbreaking stories of many Canadians to Parliament, to Liberal ministers who shamefully brush aside and who have continued to double down on harmful policies, which are squeezing our middle class. This Conservative motion today is calling on the government to give people a break and immediately cancel the carbon tax. The Liberals shrug off that Canadians shouldn't worry about the carbon tax hike and that it's not a big deal because they will be getting money back in rebates. But the reality is, despite what the Liberals claim, most Canadians will be paying more in carbon tax than what they will receive back. In provinces where the Liberal government has forced the carbon tax directly onto residents, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, a nonpartisan office, has calculated that most households will see a net loss in their income as a result of this tax. In a province like mine of BC, which collects the carbon tax and leaves it up to the provincial government to determine if they give any back to its people, the federal government still imposes the amount that has to be charged. By 2030, according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, some households will be paying thousands more into the carbon tax than what they will receive in rebates. From the Parliamentary Budget Officer to the Bank of Canada to regular Canadians, it's very clear. This carbon tax is hurting Canadians who are already struggling with a generational cost of living crisis, a housing crisis, an economic slowdown, and now further tax increases. Mr. Speaker, for residents in my community, an increase in the carbon tax means paying more for basic essentials, from farm to table. And I want to talk about how the carbon tax affects farmers. 45% of the land in Kelowna Lake Country is agriculture. And farmers across BC and Canada are being hit by the carbon tax, and this is affecting our food security. Farmers know what the carbon tax does to their product. It raises the costs they pay to grow, package, and ship. This is multiplied if their agricultural product is turned into a value-added product, where the costs are again added at each stage due to the carbon tax for production and distribution. Ultimately, these businesses make less, and some costs get passed on to consumers. Thus, the cycle of ongoing inflationary increases the Liberals are creating exists with this carbon tax. One of Canada's top agricultural experts, Dr. Sylvain Charlebois from Dalhousie University, told the Agriculture Committee that continuing with the carbon tax won't just worsen this cost chain, it will collapse it. Too many farmers across Canada are at risk of their farms falling apart altogether. I shouldn't have to explain the domino effect that this will cause on our grocery bills. We've already seen a surge of food bank usage. The Central Okanagan Food Bank reported a yearly increase of 30%, similar numbers that have been reported right across the country. A family knows what the carbon tax does. It means a freezer less full, a fridge less stocked, and a cupboard emptier. A restaurateur knows what the carbon tax does. It means higher costs on all of their ingredients. In my opinion, the Liberals have a clear choice to make today, as do all members in this House. They can continue with their activist inflationary agenda of increasing carbon taxes, which has proven not to work, as the Liberals have not met any of their greenhouse gas emission goals. Or they can acknowledge that after 8 years of Liberal policies, they are causing inflation to be as high as it is, and they need to reverse course on their inflationary policies that are crushing Canadians' pocketbooks and spirit. Though there is hope, a Conservative government will put people first. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question.